Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm Nick, and this is Super Simple Security Principles, part of the I Hate Passwords Digital Self-Defense Academy, or IHP for short. This is episode 13, the simple trick Google uses to dominate. As always, joining me, our Master Guardian, Makani. Woohoo!
Hey Nick, good to be here today, man.
Hey, buddy. So to start us off today, I want to share some crazy, staggering numbers with you. In 2021, Google paid 26.3 billion to be the default search engine across all platforms. But in exchange, that same, just that branch required for search engines, that made more than $146 billion. Now, here's another one for you. Google paid a whopping 20 billion to Apple in 2022 alone to be the default search engine on all Apple devices. Oh, and it's not like Microsoft is wanting to be left out. They want the piece of pie too. They offered 15 billion to be the default search engine with Apple. And there will be links for these stories in the show notes.
Those numbers, they paint a very interesting picture of how search engines work. And thinking about them, it never fails to blow my mind about the money involved. I still remember when I first read those articles, and I always knew Google made lots of money from advertisements, but I was grossly underestimating just how much. Search engines are big business. So, with those stories as our foundation, I want to answer some questions that they raise. And here's the questions. What is a search engine? What is a default search engine? Why is Google paying so much? And what exactly does Google get for that payment? Why do I care what my default search engine is? And how do I change my default search engine?
First question, and this is a B with $1 billion question. What is a search engine?
Well, imagine for a moment that you want to Google something. Maybe it's flying frogs. We like frogs around here. You know exactly how to do that. But what you may not know is this. What you are using when you do that is called a search engine, specifically Google's search engine. But as we were talking about with those original numbers, Microsoft also has a search engine that it wants to promote, and it's called Bing. And in fact, there are a huge number of search engines. They're just so tiny by comparison with Google that most people have never even heard of them. But you can try all of them out easily by visiting their websites. And I'm going to put links for 9 different ones in the show notes, just to give you an idea of the scope of what's out there.
Simply put, search engines are used to access information across the World Wide Web, aka the internet.
I just mentioned that you can try out these different search engines by visiting their websites. But if you notice, when you go to Google something, you don't actually visit the Google website normally. You just type in the words and it magically does that search. And that is because of what we call the default search engine, which is normally Google, or on Windows, it might be Bing, the one from Microsoft. The point of a default search engine is the convenience. It lets you skip that step of first visiting the search engine's website. Unfortunately, that convenience also leads to most people not knowing of any other search engine besides Google.
Okay, so my next question, why is Google paying so much?
Well, I get this one from you, Nick. You like to say, follow the money a lot. And that's really all this comes down to. They pay that much because it earns them so much more. Those numbers that you shared with us in the beginning. But the other aspect of it is they have a near monopoly. Google has become a household term, in large part because of their search. It's a no-brainer investment.
They actually have a term for the money they're spending to be the default. It's called traffic acquisition costs, or TAC for short. Remember that cost was more than 26 billion in 2021. So my question is, they spend all this money. What exactly does Google get for that payment?
Well, like you said, it's to be the default search engine. It's just this one seemingly tiny little thing. That's all. They just get to be the default search engine nearly everywhere. But this is the simple trick I was talking about from the title of this episode. That $26 billion is all to make it so that when you search for something, that search is performed by Google. What they really get out of it is total dominance of internet searches, a monopoly, in a way that is so subtle but so thoroughly effective that most people never even recognize that it's happening.
That's a scary thought. So, besides that thought, are there any other reasons why I should care about what my default search engine is?
Well, that is a really important question. I wish we had time for it today, but actually, it's something that I want our listeners to think about before anyway, because it's a topic I'm super passionate about. And I want to share my answer eventually. But the nature of it is such that I think it's very useful if everyone comes to their own conclusions first, and then we kind of explore it together further. So, to help with that, here's a few kind of follow-up questions. What is the impact of Google being the default search engine? Not just for you, but for nearly everyone, at least in the United States. And what do you see as the implications of all your searches being supported by advertisements? How well do Google's values align with yours? I look forward to hearing your answers. You can send them in using our Contact Us page that we will include in the show notes.
All right, having heard how they spend their money, having heard some of your questions, my question for you now is, how do I go about changing my default search engine?
Well, this one's a little bit tricky to explain with just audio. So instead, we're just going to include some links in the show notes that can walk you through it. But as always, please remember we are available to help if you have any problems. But the other thing I want to reference here that you kind of alluded to is that's natural to ask as a follow-up is what search engine should I use? And it's a question that I want to take time to answer carefully and properly, so we will cover that in future episodes. In the meantime, though, there are links to a bunch of search engines that you can just play with, and you can compare the search results from them to the ones you get from Google.
Gotcha. Okay, you heard it. The important part. If you need help changing your default search engine, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, Nick. Well, that's all I've got for today. What would you say is your key takeaway from today?
I could list a billion takeaways, including billions of search results. But for me, today's episode boils down to this. Google is paying to be the default search engine. We did some side-by-side testing because let's be honest, I use Google. When we tested other search engines, I was shocked to see the different, and I mean different responses. Here's a tip. It might be time to add the use of a second search engine in those moments we want to feel secure about the decisions we are making online. Using it may just add that second layer you need.
That's a good thought. I really like that. And here's my takeaway, overall thought about today's episode. This is the tip of a very big iceberg. I wanted to do this episode because it raises some of the most fundamental issues in security. Avoiding misinformation, finding useful, accurate information. I think about the mind-boggling amounts of information available to us these days on the internet. And to say we have one tool that we go to, and that's pretty much it, to find information on the internet, that's that's just crazy. That is what I call a major digital tragedy. We should have like 100 different tools that approach it in completely different ways. Instead, we have one, Google. And I'm not talking about those different search engines we've talked about today. Yeah, I think they're worth testing out. They help. I'm grateful we have them. But really, they are just scratching the surface of what's possible. And I look forward to the future and other interesting ways to find information.
Sounds fantastic. I'd love to see it too. Okay, so there you have it. What's our call to action?
I want our listeners to pick a search engine to try out. Then, for the next week or something, each time you do a search, try the search in this other search engine in addition to Google and compare the results. The idea is just to get an awareness of what other search engines are doing and to help solidify in your mind that there are other options.
Sounds great. Okay, that's our super simple show today. Remember, just by listening, you are making an improvement to your privacy and security. We'd love to hear from you. So come visit us at ihpacademy.com by clicking on the link in our show notes. Thank you for joining us. Make it a great day. Bye bye.